Good morning, Dan and Amy. So, over the weekend, interesting interview with Jim Webb, of course, Naval Academy grad, served our country honorably in the U.S. military, and
Short-time Democratic candidate for president.
yeah, he was Democrat senator from Virginia. He had this to say when he was asked the question whether or not he'll be voting for Hillary if she's the nominee in the general election.
I'm not supporting anybody right now.
Would you vote for Hillary Clinton?
No, I would not vote for Hillary Clinton.
Would you vote for Donald Trump?
I'm not sure yet. I don't know who I'm going to vote for.
No, but not Hillary Clinton.
No, I don't. And this is nothing personal about Hillary Clinton, but I think the reason that Donald Trump is getting so much support right now is not because of the racists, et cetera, et cetera. It's because people are seeing him. A certain group of people are seeing him as the only one who has the courage to step forward and say, we've got to clean out the stables of the American governmental system right now. We've got to make it work. And if you're voting for Donald Trump, you may get something very good or very bad. If you're voting for Hillary Clinton, you're going to be getting the same thing. Do you want the same thing? 6% of the people in the country maybe want the same thing.
Interesting analysis from Jim Webb. Do you want the same thing, or do you want to roll the dice, potentially come up snake eyes, but roll the dice nonetheless? Webb, a bit of an independent thinking Democrat. Mm-hmm. So is our next guest, who hails from my favorite place on the planet.
Hawaii.
I love Hawaii.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
I wanted to buy Lanai, but
did you not have enough money?
Larry Ellison beat me to the punch, and I was a few $1 billion short as well. Our next guest, Representative Tulsi Gabbard, Democrat from Hawaii's 2nd District, who served our country honorably in the military as well, 2 combat tours in Iraq. Representative Gabbard, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Aloha, Dan and Amy. Great to join you. And I wish I knew you were interested in Lanai, Dan. I could have put in a good word or something.
Yeah, well, maybe
next time.
Well, maybe Ellison will, let me build a little resort or something there when I come up with the requisite capital. But Representative Gabbard, so you heard what Jim Webb had to say, not just about Hillary, but also about kind of the Trump phenomenon. Is that an assessment with which you concur?
Well, there's no question the deep sense of frustration that people have with government and just with that feeling of the system being rigged against the vast majority of Americans who are really working hard and struggling just to get by and put food on the table and take care of their families. So I think, when you're seeing all of the differences in this election cycle, I think you're seeing the voices of a lot of people trying to break through that.
How was Debbie Wasserman Schultz when you decided to resign your position to support Bernie Sanders? Did she understand it? And was it a face-to-face meeting, a phone call, email, text?
No, it was an email, and she was very gracious, both to me personally as well as publicly. My decision to resign from the DNC really had only to do with one thing, and that was my feeling that this issue of war and peace is the core issue for our decision as Americans to choose our next president, to choose our next commander-in-chief, and it's just not being talked about enough. There are some very drastic differences, and there is a very clear choice between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders on our Democratic ticket, and I felt so strongly that I could not stand on the sidelines and remain neutral with so much at stake. I am about 13 years serving in the Hawaii Army National Guard, as you mentioned, 2 deployments to the Middle East, and I've seen firsthand the cost of war. I served in a medical unit during my first deployment to Iraq in 2005, and unfortunately it was a very difficult time when we took a lot of casualties. And so it's critical to me that the American people, as they head state by state into these primaries, that they're informed about the differences between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders.
And you have specifically said, essentially, that you believe Bernie Sanders will exercise more judiciousness with the use of military force than will Hillary Clinton, who is more likely to get us into interventionist regime change conflicts.
That's exactly right, Dan. And, both of them have records and the records show this, as well as the current positions that they've taken on the present-day regime change war that's being waged right now by the United States and Saudi Arabia and Turkey in Syria. You know, Bernie Sanders has come out in opposition to this regime change war. He has come out in opposition to a so-called no-fly zone, which would have disastrous consequences. We saw what happened when Hillary Clinton, who was the architect behind the military overthrow of Gaddafi in Libya, who put in a no-fly zone there. We see a complete failed nation, chaos, thousands and thousands of lives lost, and now ISIS has a stronghold there. Well, if you take what she would like to do in Syria, which is the opposite of what Bernie Sanders is advocating for, she would like to continue this regime change war, and she is saying that she would put this no-fly zone in place, which would pit the United States directly in conflict with Russia. Now, if you remember that the U.S. and Russia are the only two countries in the world right now with nuclear weapons and missiles pointed at each other still, just a trigger pull away, you can really begin to think about the gravity of the situation. High cost not only to our countries but to the world.
Now, when Donald Trump during the last debate said about ordering the rank and file military to commit war crimes, and he told Brett Barrett, "Oh, they won't refuse me. They're not going to refuse me. Believe me." And there's been some pushback. Were you surprised at all by what Donald Trump said?
I was. You know, the military that I'm proud to serve in is a military of integrity and honor, and I serve with the best among our nation's sons and daughters, and I'm proud to wear that uniform, and I know that those values that exist within our military will persevere.
Yeah, now Trump, just a kind of a note on that, he did walk that back in with a statement after the fact, but yeah, in the moment it was a rather disturbing statement, and one
sounded like a dictator.
Well, it's just, I mean, Representative Gabbard, we got a lot of calls on it too from active duty military. Obviously, they are more familiar with the inadequacy of the Nuremberg defense than is Donald Trump, and they are not going to just follow orders to commit crimes. So, yeah, that was an interesting moment. And speaking of Trump and the Republican side, I know you're on the other side, but your Republican caucus tomorrow in Hawaii, what do you expect to come out of the Republican caucus?
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer to it. I think that just like across the country, I think we're in for some surprises. Hawaii is a very unique and special place, as you know, with a lot of diverse opinions and ideas. So I'll be watching and listening closely to see how that works out as well.
And one of the other topics of discussion, just as it pertains to military and national security policy, Republicans have spent a lot of time during their debates talking about the need to essentially rebuild the military, that there needs to be reinvestments in technology as well as the weapons of war. Is that a position you subscribe to as well?
Yeah, Dan, it is. And I'll tell you two reasons why. And the first is directly related to this election and the choice that I talked about, because the more we continue these interventionist regime change wars, the more of our American treasure, American taxpayer dollars will continue to be thrown into other countries, into these wars, into nation building in other countries, rather than securing our country and making sure that our own military is ready and strong, and nation building here at home, investing in infrastructure here at home. These are both critical and important things, and things that have carried the burden of our going into these continued interventionist wars for at least over a decade now. The toll that our service members have carried themselves and their military families is so extremely high, and unfortunately, it's not talked about often enough. The levels of readiness, the reduced troop strength numbers. What happens when this occurs is, the threats around the world are not diminishing, unfortunately. As ISIS and Al-Qaeda and other Islamist terrorist groups continue to spread their presence and to grow in different places, we're seeing different kinds of challenges. We've got to make sure that our military is ready, that they're trained, and that we're able to deal with that type of unconventional threat just as we need to be ready to deal with the threat coming from North Korea's continued increased nuclear and intercontinental ballistic missile capabilities.
Now,
Hawaii. I'll just mention
Sure.
one. This is personal for us because every time North Korea threatens the United States or conducts one of their missile tests, Hawaii is squarely within range and within North Korea's target when they do that. So this isn't some far out, theory. This is something that is actually a reality that we've got to have the capabilities to be able to defend our nation and our homeland again.
That's a good point. We're talking to Congressman Tulsi Gabbard, a Democrat from Hawaii's 2nd District. And so, Representative Gabbard, I got to ask you the Jim Webb question. If your guy, Bernie, doesn't make it through to the nomination, are you...
Bernie's going to make it through, Dan.
Well, just hypothetically, if he doesn't.
Play the old contingency game, right?
Yeah,
Are you going to support Hillary?
Well, I'm not going to play the contingency game. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Okay.
Right now, I am seriously focused. I'm getting on a plane in a couple hours to go and join Bernie Sanders and his team in Michigan. They've got their vote coming up tomorrow because I think that the stakes are too high and people need to be informed about the cost of these wars and the differences between our candidates so they can make a choice between more wars or taking a path towards peace.
Is he excited that you decided to quit your position at the DNC?
Well, I think he was excited to have me join his team.
I think so. Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. So, and you'll cross the bridge over River Kwai come the general election, perhaps. Representative Tulsi Gabbard, a Democrat from Hawaii's 2nd District, thanks so much for joining us. Aloha.
Thank you both. Have a great
Mahalo.
day. Aloha.
Yep.
Mahalo to you.
Thanks. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.